Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today, world-famous Jeffery Kratz, Vice President, Worldwide Public Sector Channels and Alliances from AWS. We got him off a plane for a half hour for this interview. It's pretty hard to do. Somehow we did. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell our audience that we are recording this from the floor of the 2023 AWS Summit in lovely downtown Washington, D.C. Now, I structured this. The title for this podcast officially is What's Hot and What's Not at AWS, but there's too much going on. This would be a 12-hour podcast. So I figured, well, let's take Jeffery here. We'll slice it and dice it. We'll talk about the partners and maybe top 10 things that are important with the partners here, because we can just go forever and ever and ever with this. This is an exciting show. This is a great show. Thousands of people here, huh, Jeffery?
We do, and the exciting part about the Public Sector Summit is that it's a learning conference. And from that perspective, we have customers and partners, AWS staff and more, sharing global best practices in the public sector and government, education, nonprofit, regulated health, financial services, of course, aerospace and satellite. And it's a 2-day conference of learning that occurs.
And when I walked in here this morning, I saw people lined up. They weren't lined up for coffee. They're lined up to get in the learning sessions. I mean, this is the hottest place in town to be, isn't it? Maybe the cool guys are hanging out here.
You got to wear comfortable shoes, because if you're a little bit late getting to one of the sessions, you're going to be standing. In fact, we just had a wonderful session with a room full of partners, standing room only, sharing best practices of how they've implemented cloud services around the globe.
Well, I'm just going to take a small topic and toss it out there. Let's run through it for a few minutes here. Partner Transformation Program. Is this like a weight loss program or something? Or what is this all about?
Well, it's an amazing program that we launched a couple of years ago, and we've had over 700 partners walk through it. And the focus of the program, PTP, is to help our partners accelerate their own digital transformation and business transformation. One of the exciting things that we announced this week were 2 additional workshops and modules. One focuses on Cloud Center of Excellence. How do they help an organization from a culture perspective and business process make the migration from servicing on-prem to in the cloud? The second module that we announced is a CFO to CFO conversation. How do our partners work with their board of directors, their investors, in highlighting their success, their financial success? And so we're excited to announce that this week.
So, Jeffery, I went to the AWS website and saw your blog. There's a blog dedicated just to the public sector. In fact, there's a blog, How to Create a Center of Excellence.
We do.
It's right there. It's all there in front of you.
Well, what we're seeing around the globe are thousands and thousands of partners leveraging AWS to provide the myriad of solutions that our mutual customers are needing. Up there, we highlight different success stories. And from that perspective, sharing those best practices help partners from Singapore to Sydney to San Francisco and beyond.
I went to YouTube and typed in your name and saw all these interviews from all over the world. It's like, how are we going to get this guy off a plane? And there's a great interview you did with Gretchen Perry. And she has a quote, better than you, by the way. Her quote is this: "We want to turn data into knowledge." That's almost like what AWS does.
Well, and that's the exciting part of the partnership of what AWS with a very strong, deep, and broad partner community gets to do. And SLAM's just one of many partners that are out there. From that perspective, it's helping bring the insights as well as the different practicalities out to our customers. And Gretchen and the organization's done a beautiful job.
6 years ago, back when you were in college, I launched a podcast called Students versus Startups Showdown in the Potomac. And we take students and put them from startups like little Jeffrey, and they go back and forth. The students loved it. Startups loved it. And when I realized that here you have a GovTech accelerator for startups just within the building here. I mean, on the checklist, buddy.
That was one that we are excited to announce, and that's the next startup accelerator. When we got started 17 years ago, one of the core areas that we engaged were the startups community. And in fact, there's a high percentage of startups globally leveraging AWS. But they needed some assistance, so we started the Startup Accelerator. We've done accelerators in healthcare, defense, sustainability, and more. From that perspective, this week we announced the GovTech Accelerator. Nominations are open right now. And those selected will have a 4-week intensive business, technical, time with venture capitalists and more to accelerate their impact, specifically in the justice and public safety environment.
Tomorrow morning, you're going to be in a plane, and I don't want to talk about 40,000 feet. I want to go to outer space.
Sure, absolutely.
My friends over at Euroconsult, and I know a lot of people over at Euroconsult, by the way, they tell me there'll be 17,000 new satellites by 2030. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, what we do know in the satellite community is that more satellites means more ground stations. And so you're even involved in that market.
In fact, we were just highlighting an amazing, inspiring story from Infostellar that originally is a startup in Japan that's democratizing how information can be shared across satellite organizations, which was traditionally siloed. We also just heard from Maxar, a longtime AWS all-in partner that provides satellite images out for disaster response scenarios, helping governments, as well as from practically commercial planning. And so much more now are leveraging for satellites the images, the data, and the processing, quickly leveraging cloud services. Helps them have a speed of information and innovation coupled with the cost savings.
Yeah, I wonder if Naomi's going to be at Communication, which is going on right now, talking about ground stations, I'm sure.
What was inspiring from her is that as she grew up, she always wanted to be an astronaut. And a part of that, she told the story about growing up and she wanted to make a difference in the world while loving space. From that perspective, she shared her inspiring story that's out there and how it is delivering innovation through collaboration.
Well, we're in Washington, D.C. I'm obliged to talk about the President of the United States. Right today in Washington, D.C., the President's going to meet with the Prime Minister of Britain. And one of the line items on the agenda is, drum roll please, artificial intelligence. I mean, mandatory, you know. When you take your taxi to the airport tomorrow, you have to talk to the person driving it about artificial intelligence, I assume. Sure. So what's the scoop with AI here?
Well, actually, Amazon's been involved in AI and machine learning for years. In fact, we have hundreds of thousands of customers that are leveraging the different tool sets, such as AWS TechTrack, SageMaker, as well as other services that we've provided. We're continuing to innovate on behalf of our customers globally. And recently, we launched a terrific blog up on aws.amazon.com that talked about 3 new services that are out there. And from that, we're continuing to innovate. Products such as Bedrock or Code Whisperer. What's exciting about Code Whisperer for developers is that we're seeing a 57% efficiency in developing code faster, leveraging the generative AI capabilities that are there. More to come, but we're also bringing that experience from a global community of millions of active AWS customers and sharing their best practices.
You know, it's always interesting to do show prep for these interviews. Didn't know which road we were going to go down. And so I went to Google this morning and I typed in, what is cloud native? First thing to pop up, AWS. They're the first on the list.
Well, and that's one of the exciting parts. You know, AWS launched 17 years ago. And since the beginning to now having a huge number of services available, from storage to compute, you name it. There's also a broad and deep partner community that has jumped on in. Solutions in ISVs to those on the systems integration, combining the power of cloud computing with on-premise or in hybrids type of scenarios. And it's exciting to see those cloud-native organizations, especially in the partner community, be successful.
I want to kind of focus in on the partners. I've been to many, many conferences over the years, and sometimes, I'm not saying that they're aggressive, but sometimes partners may look at each other and, you know, view them as competition and sharp elbows. I don't see any sharp elbows here. If you walk in the hallway here, it's someone's grabbing someone else to this learning session or that learning session. So your partner environment seems to be different, more human maybe. Is that I don't know. What do you say? Human?
We're seeing a high degree of collaboration between our partners, whether it's Lockheed Martin and NVIDIA that worked on a project for NOAA to help provide more accurate and better forecasting methodologies, especially in a changing world of climate that we've got, to Okta or CloudStrike that worked with state governments to help provide additional security, transparency, to minimize the security threats that are out there. We're seeing much more partner-to-partner interaction than ever.
Good. Where do you see these conferences going in 4 or 5 years and more and more interaction between partners, which I'm seeing here. Where do you see it growing?
Well, we're seeing it grow in a number of different ways. One is that we're remaining true that these are really learning conferences, opportunities for our partners to not only meet but to share their experiences, customers, as well as the AWS staff, to listen to the insights, the learning, so that we can continue the rapid pace of innovation from a services perspective to programs. We're making more of the in-person events available digitally. In fact, the keynote yesterday by Max Peterson, Vice President of Worldwide Public Sector, was broadcast out to lots of individuals that weren't able to attend in person. So we're going to continue to explore different mediums to share these learnings out to a global community.
It makes a whole lot of sense here. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here. You have been listening to Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Jeffery Kratz, Vice President, Worldwide Public Sector Channels and Alliances at AWS.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.